I am the father of two children. One is 9 and one is 6. And I'm kind of an old guy, so I appreciate your prayer. But I have asked myself the question that I want to address now that someone offered many times, and that is, what does the Bible say about raising up and disciplining a child? And it actually says, I guess I want to be careful how I say this. It says very little. That is, there is not a lot of instruction given specifically in the scriptures about the process of raising kids, but the smaller sections that are given, the statements that are made, say a lot. We do have some admonition that God gives to Israel with regards to children being trained in the law that I think applies. The content now is different, but the admonition is similar. And there are some statements in the New Testament that are important, and I'll sum those up quickly for you because I'm fairly familiar with these things. And then there's a lot of different things we can draw on from Scripture that can fill in the spaces there. God told the Israelis in the giving of the law, and I think it's in Deuteronomy, but I can't remember specifically, towards the beginning, I suspect. But the idea was, here is the instruction, the spiritual instruction for the nation of Israel. And God says, you take these things and you talk to your children about these things. When they are rising up, when they are lying down, you put them like tablets on your forehead. You know, you bind them on your doorpost, and this is why if you go to a Jewish home, you can see a little thing kind of attached to the doorpost that maybe has a scroll in it or something representing the scroll, and that is reflective of that command. Now, he didn't want us to put something on our head. He didn't want us to just stick it on the door. The point was that these become the primary influence of how we think and how we live. And this is what's to be passed on to our children. So as we're raising our children, spiritually speaking, the substantive details of following God in his kingdom are not only things that we're to understand, but we are to pass these on to our children. And I like the way he says in Deuteronomy, when you're rising up, when you're going to bed. Last night, my children and I had a conversation while I was trying to put them to bed. And for some reason, this is when they come up with a lot of spiritual questions. So we were talking about these kinds of things. And I don't do that every single night. But what is the case in our household, or at least what I'm trying to cultivate, is a general perspective of being free to talk about God and spiritual things, or to communicate spiritual lessons in a vast array of circumstances in our lives. This isn't something we do on Sundays. This is the way we live our lives. And I think that's what Moses had in mind in writing Deuteronomy. Actually, that came directly from God, but this is the point. So this is one thing you do. You train your children in the fear and the discipline and the love of the Lord. Now, those are all different things, by the way. The fear, that is the deep respect. When I pray with my girls and they start goofing around, I say, look, that's not polite before God. We're talking to God here. And it doesn't mean you have to always be solemn, but when you're talking to kids, you want them to understand the gravity of it. All right? Secondly, the discipline. That is, there are habits that we develop on a regular basis that begin to seep into our lives and change our characters and our minds and inform our minds and inform our behaviors. So discipline, regular attention to things that have to do with spiritual things. This might mean going to church on a regular basis so kids get into the habit that this is part of their life, but also doing other things on a regular basis. And also not just the fear of the Lord, not just the discipline of the Lord, but also the love of the Lord. I want my children to know that the Lord is a good father that deeply cares for them, and the best way for me to communicate that is to model being that kind of father to my children. So there's one example of what the scripture has to say. Lots in Proverbs about generally wise living that you can begin to employ. The New Testament basically says that children ought to obey their parents, because this is the first commandment with a promise, so that it will go well with you, all right? they're under the protective custody of the parents. And even though the parents don't do everything right, they are the means of protection that God has given the child. And it's better for the child to obey the parents, even if they don't understand. And even sometimes when the parents don't always make the best decision, this is part of living in a fallen world. But it's better to be under that protective authority than for kids who don't know any better, they don't have the wisdom to try to figure things out themselves. So God says, obey your parents, and things will go well with you. And parents, don't exasperate your children. So here's something for me. Don't be so demanding on your children or act towards them in such a way that they just get exasperated. And I talk too much. Fortunately, I find a way to make a living at it. But when I'm talking to my kids, I can overwhelm them. They get flooded. And just yesterday, my daughter said, "Papa, stop talking." I'd been disciplining and addressing a problem, and I realized I just went too far. I need to cut it off. So those are some of the basic things. The most important thing, though, about I think about being a parent and raising the child up in the Lord more than anything else is modeling a way of life for them. This kind of thing is caught much more than it's taught. And I think as a parent, what I want to do, and I commend this to you, is to live my life so deliberately before the Lord in front of them that they catch my fear of the Lord, my discipline in the Lord, and my love for the Lord.